Hey guys, Firebat here, bringing you some Uldum essentials. So they asked me if I would like to make a video. I said, why yes, I'd love to make a video. I said, what would you like me to make it on? And they said, whatever you want. So I went around the internet and looked at things that people were talking about. And this seemed to be a pretty popular topic. A lot of people are upset about Control Warrior. They don't know how to play against it. They don't like Dr. Boom, yada yada, so on and so forth. They can't win. Rage. So I decided let's make a video on how to beat and play and build for Control Warrior. So we start off with, is Dr. Boom unstoppable? Because that's kind of the general gist of what I felt the internet was throwing back at me. I don't know, maybe. It's pretty good. He's definitely absurd, but unstoppable? Well, let's find out. So we did some background research on Control Warrior. Control Warrior here, very high win rates, very high sample size, lots of people playing it. Pretty much all the lists are exactly the same, not a lot of variety. Your average guy that's going to play Control Warrior did not make his own deck list and net decked it and is just jamming one of the standard Control Warrior lists. So that's actually good. It means it's kind of exploitable. You know what's going on, you know the gist of it, you can kind of plan for it and play against it. Also some background research. What decks have been doing well versus Control Warrior? What can we learn about this? So Quest Paladin seems to be doing really, really well. This is a very greedy version of Quest Paladin, I might add. But that's the standard one. So apparently you can get away with running the Undertaker, double Mechanical Whelp, a 7-drop with little to no early game. So I don't know what ladder they're playing on and how they're not versing any aggro, but more power to them. They're crushing the Warriors. Get them out of there. Keep crushing all those warriors. Quest Warlock as well has a very powerful win rate versus Control Warrior, as you can see there. It's an interesting deck, not as popular, not as many people playing it. It definitely needs some more refinement. The lists for Quest Warlock are all over the place, but Quest Warlock's able to get the job done. And then the Secret Hunter is able to get the job done, the most aggressive of the types here. So that's kind of interesting that an aggro deck is able to actually kind of whittle its way through. So it's true, decks can be made to beat Control Warrior. There's 3 right there. So let's see if we can replicate that. So options to beat Control Warrior. Option 1, you win before they even play the boom. You smork them down. Can you aggro Control Warrior down? Let's see. Option 2, you win after the boom. So I'm going to try to explore option number 1 first, and if that doesn't work, move on to option number 2. So we do that by listing out all of the turns and seeing how we can interact with them. So Warrior options on turn 1, Warrior can play an Eternium Rover or a Town Crier, which you might think, oh my gosh, my Warrior opponent always has his 1-drop. There's only 2 1-drops in the deck. Well, this is because if you're one of the more aggressive classes, Rogue, Paladin, something like that, the Warrior is not going to keep any other card besides Eternium Rover and Town Crier off the mulligan. Thus, he is seeing, if he's going first, he's seeing the 3 cards of the mulligan, and he throws them back, right? And then he draws 3 new cards, so that's 6 cards that he's seeing, and then he pulls the 7th card off the top of his deck. So now he's getting 7 chances at the sample, which is pretty high. So at the end of the day, he's able to have pretty consistently, Warrior is going to be having their 1-drop on turn 1. Next, Warrior follows that up with, you know, if they happen to get it, more 1-drops, or if they have it, you know, the Frightened Flunky, which is generally not kept in the mulligan, if you look at the kept data on HS Replay, or the Warpath. But most of the time, more likely than not, Warrior's going to Armor Pass on turn 2. They mulligan for their 1-drop, they hit their 1-drop, fantastic, that was their whole game plan, and then they Armor Pass. Turn 3, the Warrior options, the Warrior can hit you with the Coin plus Relentless or Restless, not Relentless. It seems relentless, but Coin plus Restless Mummy to be able to pretty much clear up anything in the game. That is a tough one. They could also, if they don't want to expend the coin here or don't have the coin here, they can Armor Shield Slam something, or if you were left the Eternium Rover alive, it could get snip-snapped, and that's deadly. Or they just shield block. But overall, this is one of the weaker turns of the entire Warrior class, our Control Warrior deck. They generally don't do a lot here. You know, they often don't have their 1-up snip snap, even though it's kept pretty often in the mulligan. But they generally don't have their 1-up snip snap, and if they don't have coin, they can't use the coin. So you won't have to worry about a coin relentless mummy. So the only really issue here is if they happen to have coin, then it can be a little annoying. But if they don't have coin, warrior pretty much just passes turn 3. Turn 4 warrior options, they have access to coin both of their AoEs, whether that be the dynamatic or the brawl, so you want to try and set up for that if you can. And they have access to the relentless mummies, so huge amounts of removal there. They have the warpath, which can come out clearing up a bunch of small minions. Then they have access to, you know, cute little combos that they won't have super frequently. It's going to be pretty rare that you have a 2-card combo on turn 4 that you're not mulliganing for. So, you know, the Shield Block Shield Slam is not going to pop out too often. Still, just the power of all of these different things coming together is pretty absurd removal-wise. Technically speaking, you can kind of justify not playing around Warpath if you think the matchup is not great for you. So, when you're playing your aggro deck and you have an Aversa Warrior and you feel unfavored, and you think, man, this spot is terrible, and there's not a lot of ways I can beat the Restless Mummy, and maybe you know he has it because he drew it off a Town Crier, that might be a time where you're like, all right, let's all in against Warpath. A lot of times I think players are too afraid to do that, when really Warpath is a card that's only kept like 20% of the time or so in the mulligan, and is not, they don't draw a lot of cards by then, so it's not super likely that they're going to have one of their 2 copies of Warpath on turn 4. If they're not keeping it in the mulligan. Warrior options on turn 5 are pretty important to try and play around the best you can. They have the ability to clear a 5 health board while also developing with the Dynamatic. And they can clear a bunch of minions with Brawl, so you want to try and put out like more than 5 health and also be playing around Brawl though. So you don't have too many bodies while you do that. And then you don't want to leave them with a mech because they could potentially have Zilliax. And they could potentially have Super Collider, so you don't want 2 minions next to each other if you can avoid it. And they have the new card Plague of Wrath, which, you know, you probably don't have too many injured minions at turn 5, but, you know, maybe once in a blue moon you do, so keep an eye out for it. But it's important to note that if you've been tracking their hand well, you saw the Town Crier card, you're like, all right, that's a mummy, so we know he doesn't have the Zilliax tutored, you probably can afford to focus mainly on the Brawl and the Dynamatic. Because the other 3 cards are one-ofs, and they're pretty unlikely to have them at that point. So most of your attention should be on the Brawls and the Dynamatics, rather than the Zilliax, Super Collider, and Plague of Wrath. In an ideal world, you play around all of them perfectly, which, you know, maybe you have a hand that can do that. But oftentimes in Hearthstone, you're going to have a hand that can play around certain things, but not everything. And if you're going to play around certain things, play around the 2 on the left instead of the 3 on the right, unless Town Crier, of course. So how do we combat this as an aggro deck? Can aggro get through this? Is it possible? We have here the Eternium Rover and the Town Crier. The 1/3 stat line is really strong, and they're going to consistently have one of these 2 guys. So you want to play a 1-drop that is big, like Flame Imp, or gets big, like maybe the Light Warden, or Murloc Tidecaller, or Secret Keeper, or Mecharoo because of the Mech Tribal, where you could magnetize something onto it. Alternatively, you can play resource-generating 1-drops like Cleric, that can kind of punish the fact that they're not going to be doing anything on turn 2. So you don't strictly need to be pulling ahead on turn 1. But overall, there's not a whole lot of options. To run 4 1-drops of something from this sort of collection, and I was really digging deep to try and find 1-drops that were acceptable for pulling ahead, you're rarely going to pull ahead on turn 1 against Warrior. You're going to need some 2-card combination to get ahead of them and such like that. So you're really going to need to have your deck built to take Storm on the board early, which doesn't lend itself well towards the rest of the game. So not the easiest turn to try and pull ahead against Warrior. But luckily for you, their turn 2 is not really the strongest turn in the world, so that gives you a little bit of time. Oftentimes, they're going to be armoring on turn 2, remember that. They don't have that many options. They have a few of them, and they've generally played a 1-drop on 1 at this point, so they're very less likely to have one in their hand. So what you want to do to exploit this is, they have a 1-attack minion in play, and they're armor passing. How can we generate resources behind that? So we could play the Underbelly Angler, we could play, you know, Whirl Kick Master, maybe if there were some more combo cards, right? But, you know, it's the idea of that. So things that generate resources, because the Warrior's removal is not really online yet, and they can't really punish it that much. As well, you could also buff some of your 1-drops that you stuck from the previous turn, or magnetic them, or buff them with some other tribals that could be able to, you know, keep snowballing that early board presence. So, you know, turn 1, aggro kind of gets beat down. Turn 2, aggro, you know, they get their foot in the door. Turn 3 is where things can be kind of messy if your warrior opponent's on the coin. Restless Mummy is, you know, one of the strongest plays, I would say, in the game against aggro, it's really going to shut down, you know, your shaman or your rogue or whatnot that's trying to aggress on your opponent, because they get to kill not one but two minions really cleanly. So it can be very difficult and start really, you know, running up the supply of minions for the aggro player. If they don't have coin, it's a little bit easier because they do nothing then. They play Snip Snap or they Shield Slam something, and those are really easy to sort of play around. And so if they're on the coin, it's a dangerous turn. Warrior in general, I think, is a little bit stronger on the coin because they can control the power spike a little bit better. I think it goes for like a lot of control decks. The coin's pretty good when you're a control deck because you get better mulligan odds for your reactive tools, and you get a control when the swing happens, so you get to use a swing to react to your opponent. And so being reactive on the coin is generally better, I would say. But yeah, if the warrior's not on the coin, easier turn for the aggro. You want to try and play minions that can hopefully keep snowballing whatever you've been snowballing, because in order to get something stuck in the early game as aggro, it has to be snowballing. You know, otherwise you're not really getting over the rover hump. So you continue your mechs or your tribals. One of the things to make note is if you're going to play aggro versus warrior, mechs are probably the way you want to go. It's pretty much every class because they avoid dynamatic, they snowball early, and they can make use of the extra time that's given before warrior makes it to their mummy and gets their removal online. Next up, turn 4. So the aggro options against the turn 4 things. One of the things to really note is Bone Wraith. Bone Wraith owns Restless Mummy. It doesn't die to coin Dynamatic completely. It's just one of the best, I think, aggro options that no one's playing right now. I can't believe there's not more Bone Wraiths out there on the ladder. I think this card's super underrated. And if you want to push down a warrior with mid-rangey aggro threats, Bone Wraith should definitely be in your arsenal, as the Restless Mummy can't even full clear it. It just lives. It's crazy. Replicating Menace as well, just to follow that mech theme. More mech cards that are quite good versus warrior. And, you know, refresh on the note I was saying earlier, it's okay to maybe all in here. You know, it's turn 4, so you're like, really? You're just all in on turn 4? Yeah, that's when you kind of have to do it. You got to realize the games against warrior, if you're an aggro deck, you have a very short-lived clock. And in order to get that damage in, you're going to have a board that's sticking for more than one turn. So you kind of all in pretty early if you feel like you're in a weak spot, or if you feel like it's the best way to secure your victory. I would take a 60-40 any day of the week in Hearthstone. So take your 60-40s when you get them, and Disrespecting Warpath is a nice little 60-40 you can get if they kept a card or something. Alright, next up, the aggro options for turn 5. If they still have the coin, Triple Warpath is something to look out for. Don't play a bunch of 3 health minions. But generally speaking, like I was saying earlier, try and play around Brawl and Dynamatic the best you can. Try and play mechs, try and play Reborns, try and play Death Rattles, and that sort of stuff. And then maybe you can get there. Now, I looked through the entire collection for every single card that could be good in the situations for the turns prior than turn 5. And there were not a lot. I'm telling you. Pretty much everything has to be a combination of 2 cards to keep up with Warrior's removal, which is not where you want to be. You don't want to be getting 2 for 1 left and right. And you pretty much are when you're going against a Warrior. You're getting 2 for 1 left and right, and they're gaining armor while it's happening. So that's not good for the aggro player. So summary, turn 1, very difficult to pull ahead. They're oftentimes going to shut down your 1-drop with their 1-drop while gaining armor, or drawing a rush minion that will later kill your minions. Turn 1, you just get owned. Warrior has some of the best 1-drops in the entire game. Turn 2, you have a little bit of breathing room as an aggro deck. You can get a snowball card down, and they don't have the time to kill it. It's going to be able to have at least 1 turn of snowballing, which usually a snowman's 3 snowballs, but you know, you get some progress done. Turn 3, you could keep snowballing, which is fantastic. So if you're an aggro deck on the coin and you can coin out, let's say, you coin out to the Murloc guy. Oh, jeez. You coin out the Underbelly Angler, or you could coin out to the Evil Totem. You're going to be able to have a lot of success because Warrior is pretty slow at getting enough power out to react to those things. Even just 2 health, they're slow at getting enough power to get out to react to it. So coining snowball things, really good, and it can be a key spot where an aggro deck can find edges versus Warrior. Turn 3, if they have the coin, you're pretty screwed. Coin Mummy kills everything that costs 3 in the game. So Turn 4, few cards or card combinations of cards live through the Mummy, or the other powerful coin options that they have. They could still Dynamatic you, they can Brawl, they can occasionally Warpath, and there's always the Wild Shield Slam that could come out and mess things up. So, overall, most of the time Warrior is going to be shutting you down turns 1 through 5, except for turn 2. So turns 1 and 3, 4, 5, if they have the coin, you get kind of shut down as the aggro deck. And that's kind of reflected in the deck lists we saw earlier, actually. Winning before boom isn't going to be very consistent. Looking at the way the curve lined up and what we were just talking about. Referencing the decks that were having success versus Warrior that we mentioned earlier. So Quest Paladin, their curve and the way that they interact, they lose the board early on versus Warrior. Like, they don't win before the boom ever. They never win before the boom. But what they do win is in the late game when they're able to complete the quest and start doing things for the giant value pushes. Quest Warlock never is able to win before the boom. Quest Warlock wins with the Mechathune combo at the end, the OTK, where it doesn't matter how much life you have. And then Secret Hunter has been able to actually kill the Warriors. But is it before boom? No, it's never before boom. It's because they have King Crush, and Zul'jin, and sticky death rattles and stuff like that. They kind of just try not to be super far behind during the early stages of the game, and then try and close the game with huge amounts of value. And the Zul'jin is the comeback mechanism. So you kind of get beat up, you lose the board, you Zul'jin, you gain the board back, you play big bombs, and then you close it out that way. But you're never really beating them before boom. You're never rushing them down early. So that's something that's key to note about how we can beat Warrior. It's rushing them down is not going to work. So what is going to work? All of those decks are kind of combo-oriented decks, except for the exception of Zul'jin. So I would say the number one way you can find yourself being able to beat Warrior would be doing sort of combo-y things. So let's take a look at then more of a curve if you're trying to go for a combo-oriented plan. So combo options turn 1, they still have the Eternium Rover and the Town Crier, and instead of trying to go full aggro, instead of trying to kill them before, we're trying to kill them after boom. So that means our deck is going to be something with a plan after boom of how we can beat boom. That's the most important thing here. We have to have a plan for after boom. And so the plan for after boom can be, it can be a quest like Untapped Potential, or that could just be a means to a bigger combo like a Malagos combo or a Lucent Bark thing, or even the Gonk, or the Supreme Archaeology into the Mechathune stuff, or even the Paladin quest, as we saw is having lots of success there. But just in general, turn 1, you don't want to be trying to fight with these guys. Eternium Rover and Town Crier are strong. We want to be going around them and then fighting on turn 2 versus them. Unless we want to play like a 1-drop, we have 1-drops in our deck for other matchups, and then, we want 1-drops that are able to generate resources. But in general, we want to be ignoring turn 1, because that's where Warrior's strong, and then focusing on turns 2 and 3, where they're weak, and exploiting that. So turn 1, we just want to ignore their minions, draw cards, set up quests, prepare our game plan for later. Which is kind of weird. Warrior is like, it's a control deck, but it's got sick 1-drops. Turn 2, we can try and recover the tempo lost from doing nothing on turn 1. Nothing development board-wise, by, playing a 3-2, which can contest the Eternium Rover. It does sometimes get shut down by the Frightened Flunky, but is rarely a card that they keep, if they presume you're an aggressive class. I guess you might keep it versus Hunter at this point, but still, it's only 2 copies in the whole deck. Probably dodge it. And then Doomsayer can be used to shut down Flunky/Eternium Rover stuff and recover the board immediately, if that's your prerogative. Or you can just continue ignoring the board and have some means to get it back later. For example, you can Thunderhead the board back later after drawing cards, or do something of that nature. But regardless, you kind of want to be ignoring the board and drawing cards and setting up later game plans against Warrior. You want to be preparing for this boom that's coming on turn 7. You don't want to just run in there all haphazardly and be trying to play minions and play their game. No, they can't pressure you, so you want to ignore their game and play your game. Turn 3, Warrior's not good at pressuring you, as I was saying, so really, they only have one minion that can pressure you, the Snip Snap. If they don't have that, they're not adding any pressure. So they can do the Relentless Mummy with the coin, but it's not the strongest minion to pressure with. So generally speaking, turn 3, the decks that are going to have the most success are decks that are just drawing and ignoring the board still and setting up for those later combos. And basically, that's all I'm going to keep saying. That's how you build a combo deck. It's a bunch of draw. And you set up the combos at the end. I've played a lot of combo decks versus Warrior that's pretty sweet. It's my favorite archetype of deck. I'd like to show you some. Double melee and light them up. And we missed 4 damage. And we missed 4 damage, huh? Boom's OP, there's nothing I can do! Oh my god! Oh my god! Look at all of the crushes! It's so beautiful! Yes! Oh, it's so beautiful! Oh my god. So, the decks also that are beating Warrior here, you got to see my crazy combo hunter and then Malagos Druid. But other than that, these decks are finding their way and they're having success. Interestingly enough here, there's things like Bomb Warrior, which is super unpopular on the ladder right now, having tons of success. Over time, I think this whole Warrior problem is going to be fixed a little bit, because right now it's super polarized. There's a lot of aggro decks that are beating up some unrefined combo decks, and then there's a lot of warriors beating up the aggro decks, and there's that little circle going on. But in the future, once we start getting like more refined lists of, say, Bomb Warrior that can beat out the Control Warriors, then all of a sudden all the warriors start playing Bomb Warrior like they were towards last meta, or you know, more threats in their warrior to out-threat the other warrior. Not necessarily bombs, but just the warrior with more threats is going to win the warrior mirror. And as warriors add more threats, that opens up a window of opportunity for aggro decks to find different holes, you know? So as they start cutting some of that early game and they start shifting away from different aspects, it'll open up holes there. As well as if we can find, right now, since the warriors are so anti-aggro, we're having like tons of success with the quest decks. We're having tons of success with late game focused Highlander mages and stuff. But all of these decks are beating Warrior post them playing Dr. Boom. So Dr. Boom's definitely not crazy OP. If anything, I think the anti-aggro tools are pretty crazy OP, and they're kind of polarizing matchups that way. But so the idea here is, if you want to beat Warrior, you need to start trying to explore some combo decks or some quest decks and trying to make them better against aggro so that they can have more viability on the ladder and other matchups. Because right now, the only issue with playing a deck like this is you're going to get shreked by some aggro with either of these decks. And since the metagame is a lot of warrior and a lot of aggro, you're only going to be winning, you know, less than half the time. So as these decks get refined, and as these decks start having more of a chance versus aggro, the metagame will become less polarized, and the warriors will have to adjust. The warriors will have to start adding pressure. They can't just accept these win rates. So if these decks start becoming more popular, the warriors are going to have to add pressure. And if the warriors add pressure, all of a sudden the window for the aggro decks opens up. So Dr. Boom is stoppable. He's just in a bad position right now. He's in a pretty polarized position because of the lack of combo decks, I'd say. And I think the lack of combo decks is due to the fact that the expansion is so new. The expansion is brand spanking new. And so not a lot of people have figured out the correct way to take these deck lists, refine them so that you have just enough gas to do your combo and beat Warrior, but as much anti-aggro stuff as you possibly can jam in there at the same time. And I think over time, people will figure out better ways to build these decks, and that will start to happen. It's really starting to happen with the Hunters. The Hunters are doing great. I have a variation of the Highlander Hunter. I have a Mech Highlander Hunter that destroys Warrior, because as we were saying and we were going through the curve things, a lot of the things that line up really well versus Warrior were mech stuff, and they also are immune to Dynamatic. So that's just one of the strongest ways to combat Warrior is with the, you know, mechs. So the Mech Highlander Hunter also has the gas to go over the top of Boom, so it has the ability to sometimes cheese them out before Boom, and then has the same sort of late game gas to go over the top of Boom. So it absolutely destroys some Warriors. So I think it'll just take a little bit of time as these sort of deck lists get refined, and then Warrior will become less of a problem gradually. I know that doesn't make a lot of people happy because a lot of people really want the pitchforks out on Dr. Boom. And I do think Dr. Boom's overpowered, but, you know, overpowered cards have always existed. There's always occasionally cards that are just better than other cards. Not every card is the exact same power level. So I still think Dr. Boom's stoppable. I still think there's ways that you can build your deck to be able to do it. I think, if anything, the removal package is too good. And I think a lot of that comes from Eternium Rover being such a great control tool. Card's nuts, man. Over time, we'll see how things shake up. Hopefully, you guys have been enjoying exploring Uldum, and you'll be willing to try out some of these sweet deck lists, some of these quest deck lists, and some of these more greedy deck lists that can take down the Warriors so none of us have to play versus any Dr. Booms on ladder for a long, long time, or at least a little while. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching, appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys next time. We can play one King Crush this turn too. If we gotta crush him in the face for 8 this turn. So one of these goes face, because it's gonna double, and we don't have the hand size.